Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mission for Freedom. It's great to connect with each and every one of you today. Happy Tuesday. It is February 11th, and we are broadcasting live on X American News, and Rumble. And give us a follow, like, subscribe, share, all the things. Show us the love. I didn't really understand how important that was until I started my own broadcast. And so if you would do that, we would be so honored. It really does make a big difference. And I have to say, we could not do this without our amazing sponsors and you. Today's show is sponsored by our amazing producer, Ines Cyrus. Liveuptofreedom.com is her website, but she has an art studio, lutfstudio.com. Check it out. She has some amazing pieces, artwork, vases, all the things, and you can customize. That's my favorite part. You can pick your own colors and things of that nature. So lutfstudio.com. And then also Andy Scheckman from Miles Franklin Precious Metals. I know talking about gold can be a little overwhelming because we don't know a lot about it, but at the end of this show today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things President Trump is doing that really should encourage us to purchase some gold and silver and just to diversify into some hard assets. So give that number down there, call, email me at missionforfreedom@milesfranklin.com. I'm an outside broker. I'd be glad to just have a conversation today, but look into this because diversification is a must. It's not often that I say this because, you see on podcasts, everybody says we have a special guest today. Today is really, I think, profound because we see a lot of horrific things happen from time to time in other countries, sometimes, sadly in America as well. And our guest today is an incredible human being. And that's probably an understatement when I say that. Today, we're going to be speaking with John Strand. You probably know his name if you've been watching anything about January 6th, but he was caught in that J6 trap. He says a political prisoner. I use the word hostage. He was a political hostage in the DC gulag. He is an actor, a filmmaker, model, activist, and an author now. He's also the director of American Frontline Doctors. His book, Patriot Plea, you can order it now. I highly recommend you get it. I'm going to be ordering it today. It in detail covers everything that happened. And we'll talk to him later about this, but I believe he wrote it from prison, which really reminds me of Paul. We dread conflict, we dread pain, but I believe God can turn our pain around for purpose. And I believe that's what he did for John. He was present on January 6th. At the United States Capitol to document the event. He was the hired security for, Dr. Simone Gold. She's been on the front lines with the medical freedom fight from day one in 2020. And he was sentenced to actually 32 months, but served a year because the United States Supreme Court exonerated him. He did not take the plea deal. I cannot wait for you to hear what he has to say about that, because the plea deals, there was no due process and they were extraordinarily frightening. And most people, I think many of the J6ers, understandably so, took the plea deal because their lives would have been destroyed. But John Strand, nope, he didn't do it. I'm just so impressed, so honored that he would share his time with us today. Since President Trump became president, of course, rightfully so, all the J6 hostages, political prisoners were freed. But now, what are we going to do with this? Some people might say, okay, it's over with. No, it's not over. Restitution, justice, restorative justice must be served, because what happened on that day, no matter what side, whatever propaganda you saw or didn't see, you don't really know what happened that day. We don't really know. It was very hard to get that information. And that's why I highly encourage you to go to his website, johnstrand.com, order the book first and foremost, and then go and check out his video on at John Strand USA on X. And we think we know what happened, but we really don't. And so I honorably welcome to Mission for Freedom today, the one and only John Strand. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today, John.
Wow, thank you so much for having me, Miriam. It's an honor, and that was quite an introduction. So I'm humbled and just glad to be here and glad to give testimony to the strength and faithfulness of Almighty God, who truly was my rock and my fortress going through that incredibly dark time, as you mentioned.
as we were talking about before the show, I just, you read about people like you read about, you do, right? In your history books, you read about people who said, I will not bow. I can't help but think of in the Bible, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, that was a political thing, right? I mean, they were supposed to bow and they
They were
didn't.
political hostages, actually.
Yes, yes, they were too. And you think about, Paul writing a lot of the New Testament in prison. And I was just reading the other day about that, and I thought, Lord, what if he would have avoided the pain? What if he would have just gone along to get along and supported the local narrative at the time? We would not even have the word of God like that. I mean, I believe God and his faithfulness would have gotten it to us somehow, but I think we just try to avoid the pain, avoid the conflict, fit in, so that we don't have to go through the pain. But you chose to, and it's just wildly fascinating to me that you had the fortitude, the willingness, and the strength, and the relationship with the Lord to carry you through. But first and foremost, John, I want you to, I would love for you to tell what your life was like before January 6th, because this was obviously a defining moment for you. That day, it's like almost like BC AD, it's like before Christ,
Exactly
after,
so.
it's like before January 6th, after January 6th. So what was like a typical day like for you? What was your world? I know you're an actor, somewhat of an activist, a model, actually, all
Yep.
these things. What was a regular day and life like for you before January 6th?
It's such a great question. It was absolutely very life-changing and defining in that sense. But my life before January 6th, in many ways, was a average American life. Of course, I was a full-time fashion model and actor in Hollywood, so that doesn't sound like a normal American life in one sense. But every human and every American, in theory, in our country, is supposed to be given the equal footing and the freedom and liberty to develop and exercise their rights and pursue their fullest potential as given to them by God, their destiny. And so I was an American citizen pursuing my destiny, pursuing my American dream. What that looked like for me, from a vibrant Italian American family, as I like to say. It was very, rambunctious and exciting, but amazing people. So grateful for the family that I have and the background that I came from. The Judeo-Christian tradition of morality and family values was a bedrock for me growing up as a kid. Come from a military family, so I was actually born in California, which I've always considered home, and grew up in various places around the country, but came back to California in my early adulthood to really pursue that American dream. And I was a musician first, and then developed as a model and an actor in the Los Angeles area, as well as New York and overseas. So before January 6th, leading right up to 2020, I was more or less politically anonymous, because for the obvious reason that in Hollywood particularly, you're not really permitted to be a vocal or public political conservative. I didn't necessarily see myself as conservative. I don't even like that label sometimes, at least. As a fashion model, I'm kind of people think I'm the opposite of conservative. So, but I was a Christian, and I was a proud American, and I was pursuing that American dream in my life. That meant pursuing the arts and my creativity and those expressions that God has given to me. And I wanted to use those for a good purpose. But in 2020, when suddenly the world was completely turned upside down and we were overwhelmed by lies and propaganda. Yeah, I mean, certainly as an American raised in the Judeo-Christian faith background, I had good pastors and good teaching around me growing up, so that I understood that our world is filled with lies. The devil is called the deceiver, but it became so much more overt and destructive, overwhelmingly so, with the COVID chaos and all of those lies and the propaganda of that era. So I felt God really stir my spirit at that time and call me to step forward to the front lines of civil rights advocacy. So I helped to lead the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally there in Los Angeles in 2020, which really surprised me with how successful it was. Grew very large. President Trump retweeted us during that summer of 2020.
Wow.
And we saw tens of thousands of American citizens, not all of whom were conservative, really from every conceivable color, creed, and political stripe, come to see what was going on in the heart of Beverly Hills in Los Angeles, pushing back against what was overt tyranny, predicated on public health and a lot of lies from that direction. So that was my life before January 6th. Was an artist, an activist, and an American, but really just a citizen trying to grow up and take ownership of the life God had given me and understanding my civic responsibilities as a citizen. And in 2020, that duty as a citizen to understand the value of our liberty in this country, particularly as it was defined and protected by a constitutional republic that our founding fathers were so genius and so honorable in their dedication to build for us. I understood that duty and obligation I had to recognize the value of that system and the danger of the tyranny that was threatening to overcome it. And so I just felt I needed to answer that call. And that's what I began to do in 2020, which of course led me through the Freedom Rally that I was leading in my own right as an activist on the ground, to then meet some other thought leaders and advocates, including, of course, Dr. Gold, who founded America's Frontline Doctors. And so I've been serving as the creative director for America's Frontline Doctors and now goldcare.com for now these last 4 going on 5 years. And early on in that period, of course, I was led to Washington, D.C. in the course of doing my job. I was acting my professional capacity as a colleague of Dr. Gold at Frontline Doctors and also serving as her bodyguard that day, which was required just due to the sheer size of the crowd. It was well advertised in advance that there would be 1 million people in the city that day. There were many different rallies pre-planned in advance, that we were invited to a rally event that had a government approved permit alongside of a handful of Congress people and other very well recognized national leaders. So we were there doing our job quite literally. And that's how I came to be in the city, in the District of Columbia on January 6th.
That day.
And then as we generally know, but don't really fully clearly understand, the day devolved and went sideways.
I want to take a quick break, but I really want to talk to you about how the wheels of the bus just completely fell off that day. And I think a lot of folks just think it just, naturally happened, that it naturally evolved, just like they think maybe COVID just naturally evolved and things of that nature. But when the truth comes out, we see that it wasn't just some organic situation and experience. So we're going to go to a break. Don't go anywhere, but I'd love for you guys to check out johnstrand.com and then at John Strand USA on X and watch his 14-minute video there. I'm telling you, it is profound. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with John Strand.
Well, hello everybody. It's Annie Cyrus. Welcome to my art studio where all the magic happens. This is the station for painting, and that is the station for all the resin art I do. If you want to check out my art, all you gotta do is go to lutfstudio.com. But I'm sure for this, I hope I'll see you at lutfstudio.com.
Welcome back, John Strand. Welcome back to the Mission for Freedom show. I'm just so overwhelmed by all the education that the United States and Americans are finally receiving about what happened that day. So prior to break, we were talking about how a lot of folks, me included, the way the propaganda machine was working, they were leading us to believe that this was this, insurrection, all this violence, and that, people came to just assault police officers and do all this damage. And it was quite the opposite of that. Of course, we saw some J6ers be released when finally we were allowed to see the video footage of what happened that day. And so now we can see why they wanted to keep that, because it would completely destroy their narrative, right? And so I'd love for you to talk to us about that day. So you mentioned prior to break that you, along with some congressmen, actually had permits to speak that day. They knew a lot of people were going to be there. And we all remember how the National Guard, how Nancy Pelosi did not allow them to be called in, and just all the things. It's crazy when you look at some of this footage, especially your video too. I mean, when you look and you see how few police officers there were. I mean, that is illogical to me. That is a huge red flag, first and foremost, that you're going to have all these people and you have just a few Capitol Police trying to protect the Capitol. I say in quotes, protect, but it is so fascinating to me. So talk to us. So you arrive there the morning of, you go to the Capitol, and you're probably looking for a space to protect Dr. Gold as she gives her speech. That's the goal, right? You already have a space. You knew where you were going.
We knew the general vicinity, but I had the exact same thought that you mentioned when I arrived to the northeast corner of Capitol grounds, which was, where is all the infrastructure that you would obviously anticipate for a scheduled event that included multiple congressmen? And I didn't see the stage. I didn't see obvious crowd control. I saw no police presence, except for eventually my eyes found like 5 or 6 officers ceremonially standing on the steps near the Columbus Doors entrance on the east side there. But otherwise, really no police presence or crowd control operation at all. And I knew that, of course, a very large crowd would be moving from the ellipse where they had started out for the morning event, which featured President Trump speaking himself. And many of those people were planning to then march a ceremonial protest march that was advertised in advance. It wasn't something that President Trump just suggested on the spot, like, oh, go rush the Capitol, which is, of course, the narrative that was then communicated to the world and to the public. But that's very deceptive and false, as so many other details about January 6th have turned out to be. So the thing I want to kind of predicate all of this on is, you mentioned the propaganda and just the deceptive nature of what people are being told via legacy media, or as I like to call them, lunacy media. And I use that word actually for a specific reason, because in my book, Patriot Plea, one of the central concepts that I try to distill and share with people is we're really constantly being distracted, confused, and deceived by false narratives and false dichotomies. This is a trick that works so well, so they use it over and over and over again. A false dichotomy where the presumption is A or B, left or right. I mean, there are no other directions other than left or right. So that must be the only 2 choices. But therein, of course, lies the deception. That's not necessarily the case. And the 2 choices being presented are not even what you should actually be considering or looking at necessarily. And so I make this suggestion that the real dichotomy, or the real binary choice, oftentimes, as it pertains to political forces or calculations, is one between what I call team reality. So the R would be for reality, and the L would be for the opposite or antithesis of reality, which is lunacy. And there's a direct assault on reality. Why? Because reality is from God. That's actually why.
Truth. Actually, it's truth, right?
Reality and truth are essentially synonymous. And those things only exist because God exists, and they are an expression of who he is. God is truth.
That's right.
God is reality. And so the forces of evil, the forces of darkness, deception, destruction, we know these things exist. It's kind of hard to deny them, but it can be confusing to sort of define who and where they are and how they operate, because by nature, deception is their number one tool and tactic. And so, but those forces do exist. We know that those forces are arrayed against God, which is truth and reality. So this is an assault on reality. We can see this in the radical trans ideology, occult movement that's essentially saying you can change what sex you are, because it's an assault on reality. The reality is you were born male or female, and we know this is quite obvious. So bringing it back to January 6th, the parallel is important to remember that we had recently gone through the COVID chaos, and the COVID, quote unquote pandemic, or probably more appropriately called a plandemic, right? But the idea that we all recognize COVID refers to a disease that does exist.
Right.
So no serious person is disputing that there was a virus that existed, one of the countless hundreds of thousands or probably millions of viruses over the course of human history. Not exactly special in that sense, but the deception was to make this very special and very dangerous, much more so than it actually was. But people were caught off guard by this for a number of reasons. And the point is that we were awakened from a slumber as a nation to the very uncomfortable and dangerous reality that our foundational institutions of government and media and fixtures that we've understood as a culture and as a civilization really for centuries, we've realized these things are not what we assumed or trusted them to be at a very deep foundational level of corruption and dishonesty. Now that's becoming more widely understood and accepted with the many, many lives and machinations of the COVID pandemic and pandemic chaos. But we need to realize that this is a recurring theme, right? We've seen this movie before, right? I always love to bring back the Hollywood references because that's my background. That's how I see the world. It's what clicks it for me. But I mean, it is like we're in a movie. And movies often use stories or allegories that help us to understand how things work in the real world. So we're kind of in a movie moment right now where a lot of these recurring themes are happening over and over again. And so the COVID deceptions alerted us that the media is often not only inaccurate, they are directly coordinating an effort to deceive you for some selfish or nefarious purpose. It certainly couldn't be a benign or a noble purpose, because anyone benign or noble always seeks to respect and empower other people to maintain their own individual sovereignty or their cognitive liberty, the freedom to have your own thoughts and make your own decisions. You don't have to agree with me, but if I'm trying to infringe on your ability and your right to have your own mind, that is never a good thing. That is never noble, right? So we saw so much of that with COVID, and we're seeing the exact same thing with January 6th, which now we can at least generally understand. I don't want to say it's crystal clear because there's so much deception and so much corruption still being covered up by the government, by the media, etc. But we can start to get a general sense that we've seen this movie before is another corrupt event that's been weaponized for obviously political purposes, for power, because it always comes down to power and control.
Right. That's right.
And we need to have that premise when we discuss what was January 6th, how did it happen, why did it happen, and understand that there's a lot of deception driving this narrative and this situation.
And the concerning thing to me, John, is that, I mean, this is just classic communist and Marxist move. We saw it in Nazi Germany. We saw it in Mao's China. We saw it in the Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet Union. I mean, you know, we see it in movies where they plant things in people's bags and stuff.
Yes.
I mean, it's just corruption at the core of, like you said, you so eloquently compared J6 with 2020 and the COVID pandemic, if you will. But
and just to be quickly substantive about it, you know, because many detractors or the other side or whatnot will say conspiracy theories or you're just an extremist, et cetera, et cetera. But we have, from the government's own admission, official admission that no one is disputing, because you can't dispute it, they confirmed at a minimum that were 26, I believe was the number, FBI operatives involved in January 6th. Congressman Thomas Massey distilled this so nicely. He said, you know, it's clearly proves selective prosecution, which is a constitutional violation of the Equal Protection Clause. But if you were a MAGA insurrectionist, you went to prison. If you were an FBI insurrectionist, you got a paycheck for the same allegedly unlawful activity. So the government has admitted and proved for the whole world to see without dispute that they were involved. They had entrapment elements in place. And so, like I said, you can generally see January 6th for what it is. If you want to just distill it down in a single sentence, January 6th was our American Reichstag fire moment. And any student of history that generally understands the Nazi campaign in Germany knows what that means.
That's right.
But that is what January 6th was functioning as for a very, very corrupt Biden regime.
That's so true. And I talk about that from time to time, how they set fire to just gain control, to provide Germany safety. And of course, the rest is history, sadly. But so you all were not even obviously wanting to go inside, but I remember in watching that video, you call it, "Do you know what happened on J6?" And then it says,
Yes.
you think you know what happened on J6? And then it says, "Think
Think
again."
again. Yeah.
And it's such a powerful video. But and I actually wanted to show a clip on that because
Yeah.
I remembered you saying that, first of all, you and Dr. Gold did not even want to go in, and the crowd kind of pushed you in. And then when you were in the rotunda, she was just looking to find an area to elevate on to give her speech. And then you couldn't even find your way out. It was just so completely chaotic. And this is the truth. But what is so shocking, disturbing, and even scary to me, I know the Bible says do not fear, but it disturbs me to my core, is I have a clip pulled up from your 14-minute video, "Do you know what happened on J6?" about how the prosecutor, so and I didn't even get a chance to ask you about the arrest. I want to go back to that after
Yeah.
this, what that was like. But the prosecutor flat out lied about your hand, and that
Yep.
the hand without the glove. So Inez, if you could show that clip real quick, I'd like to talk to you, John, on the other side of that about that.
As the speech permit allowed, the thought of going inside the building never even occurred to me. I had assumed with all the various speeches and rally activity that the Capitol would have little, if any, business going on that afternoon. And how did anyone get in there? It was obvious to me standing on the steps that the crowd would never be able to open the formidable Columbus doors by force. But as shown in a closed-circuit television recording inside the Capitol, the doors were opened from the inside. I was shocked during my trial when the prosecutor overtly tried to deceive the jury by showing them this clip and telling them the uncovered white hand waving towards the door was my hand, convincing the jury that I was an aggressive member of a mob and trying to attack the entrance. But I was wearing black gloves the entire day, which the prosecutor knew, or should have known, making this an obvious falsehood. The truth is, I was just stuck there in what had become a packed and energetic crowd. I clearly remember wishing I could extricate Dr. Gold from that crowd, but that was impossible.
I think that part of the 14-minute video was one of the most powerful points you made. I mean,
Interesting.
this guy is flat out busted. Like, he flat out lied
Yeah.
in your
Trial.
in your trial. Yeah.
It's shocking. I mean, as a public agent of the government, as a prosecutor for the Department of Justice, of course, you're not allowed to lie. That's a violation of ethics. It's also not your job. And this is a huge problem we have in our government overall. No one understands what their actual job is and what their objectives and their mission should be. But particularly in the Department of Justice, we have prosecutors who see getting convictions as a win to advance their career. Thus, their motivation, their incentive as a prosecutor is to get a conviction at all costs. This is antithetical to justice itself. This is anathema to what their role and responsibility as an agent of the government is and should be. So we need to examine this very carefully. A book I read while I was in prison unjustly as a political hostage is called 3 Felonies a Day by civil rights attorney Harvey Silverglate. And it's perhaps a bit technical, but I found it very readable and very lucid, and it's shocking. It's really important for Americans to read this book and understand what the justice system has been doing for decades. So it accelerated and got really bad with January 6th, but this has been ongoing for a very long time. So there's a huge ethical problem and a misunderstanding of what a prosecutor's job and role is. It's a corruption of the position to advance their own selfish interests, ultimately. But yeah, he lied openly in trial multiple times. That was a real obvious one that we can prove quite clearly. And it really is shocking. I mean, I was expecting a lot of really bad stuff to go down in that trial. I knew it was rigged from the start, but that lie held, I was aghast when I saw it.
Well, and as you so beautifully mentioned, I mean, he didn't even have to do this. You were going to lose no matter what. I mean, Trump
Correct.
loses no matter what. I mean, evidence obviously is not looked at. I mean, these juries are stacked against us in these liberal, radical left cities. But I would love, before we go, we have a little bit of time left, but I really wanted to talk, have you talk in detail about two things. First of all, the actual terrifying, abusive, completely constitutionally destructive arrest of you. And then also after the arrest, when you were sentenced to 32 months in prison because you wouldn't take the plea
The
deal. So
plea.
I'd like you to talk about what that was like to be arrested, the plea deal, and then what prison life was like.
Sure. So I want to encourage people to visit and support a movement called We Are J6. If you go to wearej6.com, wearej6.com, you can register as an advocate, as the general public. And of course, if you're a former defendant and now exonerated J6 Patriot, we encourage you to register as a former defendant. It's a consensus strategic alliance movement to gather all Americans and really the whole world behind the mission of restorative justice, as you mentioned earlier. And one of the things we're going to do with We Are J6 is collect and help to share and amplify all these many stories of absolutely horrific abuses of a weaponized government turned against her own citizens. So I certainly experienced this personally with a absolutely vicious militarized assault, an FBI SWAT team raid, truly fit for a drug cartel, weaponized and inflicted on myself and my colleague in downtown Beverly Hills. Both of us are public figures. They could just give us a phone call. In fact, they had been surveilling us for a week. I saw photos at trial. I got evidence. These guys in the bushes taking the camera. For a week they surveilled us.
Oh my gosh!
Like we were terrorists, and then jumped on us with this vicious FBI SWAT team raid. They pulverized the front door of our condo with a battering ram. Literally, it was like some demented scene out of a Jason Bourne horror movie. It was shocking. It was traumatizing. It was very damaging. And that was the one I experienced. We're continuing to highlight stories. We've had people die from miscarriages and other despair and abuse related to this mistreatment and weaponized government. So the FBI raids were atrocious. They need to be carefully examined. FBI needs to be held to account for that specifically. And of course, prosecutors who lie need to be held accountable. And judges who are supposed to be the backstop really have the highest threshold and level of authority, and we should hold them to the even higher standards. And the judges are so corrupt and partisan, and their behavior was honestly despicable, and they should be examined and in many cases impeached. So we're calling for that. We're organizing evidence, helping amplify those stories at wearej6.com. And that's a really important effort. But your other question about the plea deal and prison. Of course, this is why the book I wrote is called Patriot Plea. And you mentioned you mentioned at the beginning, Miriam, that the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this story has inspired me my whole life, but it particularly came to mind as I found myself a victim of corrupt and weaponized government, as I found myself staring down the barrel of a government cannon of horrific abuse and power that they can level at citizens, and they did. And I had to rely on my faith in God ultimately to understand what the choice was in front of me and why it was so important for me to make the right choice and not the comfortable one, even though literally everyone in my life, from my friends and family, close colleagues, attorneys, even the general public, everyone encouraged me to take the plea. That everyone said it was understandable. You can't be expected to fight against a stacked deck or a rigged system. And I understood why they encouraged me and gave me the permission to do that. But I did not have that permission from God. I had a clear call from God in this moment to understand this was an absolute black and white choice between good and evil. And I needed to stand up for good and fight against evil, regardless of the consequence, even if that should cost me my life. I mean, who am I to prioritize my life over God's command to be strong and courageous, and over his call to protect the defenseless and the innocent against the advances of the wicked? Our founding fathers sacrificed their life, their their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. Many of them died in the defense of this country as they
That's
founded
right.
it. And our armed services continue to risk their lives. So I didn't see how I could abdicate that responsibility. And so it was a monumental choice, but it was a very crystal clear choice for me. And I understood it wasn't only the fact that this was clearly a fraudulent plea offer. I was innocent and they were coercing me illegally to sign a false confession of guilt when I was not guilty, but it was also a part of a deeper, darker machination of weaponized government to create a false narrative and convince the country that hundreds and hundreds of radical domestic terrorists had predetermined they were going to break the law and assault the government and destroy democracy and all this other ridiculous hyperbole. None of it was true. Much of it was, viciously weaponized. And I knew God had called me to fight against that. So I had to reject the plea, knowing that I would be falsely convicted and put in prison for years, which is a very dark and ominous thing to face. But it's what God led me through.
Yes, and I want you to talk about the prison part too, but I think the thing that is so fascinating to me, John, and when I heard your story, I guess the psychology background of me, I'm like, what was different about John? Like, what was different? What made him stand? Because I have to ask myself that if I were in his shoes, what would I do? Would I stand? And I wonder if somebody would have, if the Lord, or if you would have thought about, like, if I were in this situation, what would I do? I think a lot of us say we will stand for sure, but you look at Peter in the Bible and Jesus is like, dude, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. You're going to, and the Bible says that when Jesus, before he was crucified, like Peter did deny him 3 times and even cursed and said, I don't even know the man. And see, I look at you, John, and I just wonder, did you know that you had it in you, that you were going to respond in that way?
I think I did. Yes. And I am as deeply flawed as any other human. So I make mistakes, and it's such an incredible blessing and relief and joy that our God is merciful, that he's gracious. My name is John Strand. John means God is gracious. My mom never fails to remember to impress this on me. And it's just, it's so true. So I'm grateful, but I knew clearly in this moment that I could not fail this test. And so I simply committed that I will do what's right, no matter how much it hurts. And I will trust God to take care of the part that I can't see or understand. And I fail. I don't always pass every test, but I knew I needed to pass this one. It was really clear. And the significance of passing the test in my mind was the opportunity to lead by example and to show the world how important it is in certain moments of particular spiritual conflict, especially when you have a clear choice between right and wrong. Some choices are not that clear. Some choices are difficult and nuanced, and you're not sure if there's an obvious right or wrong between multiple options. But when God makes it clear to you that it is black and white, that it is good and evil, you must choose good, and you must actively oppose evil. You are not able to choose good by standing silently on the sidelines. That is not good. And if it is not good, it is a silent acceptance of evil, and that equates to evil itself. So this is a binary in that sense. And the choice I had, I knew was a binary one between good and evil. And I choose good.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer says silence in the face of evil is evil itself. We just have a minute left. I'd love for you to just briefly share. I mean, you were in solitary confinement, experienced torture, not allowed a phone call. People didn't know where you were for 4 days until, I know you said Congressman Matt Gaetz was like very helpful,
yes,
but no phone call. I mean, this is psychological torture, solitary confinement is.
Amnesty International and Geneva Conventions all classify more than 14 consecutive days of isolation treatment as a form of torture. It's not permissible. It's despicable. And the violations that occurred of basic human rights as well as constitutional rights, the abuses that I personally suffered in isolation, that many other J6ers experienced and suffered, are shocking. Again, we are J6.com. We're going to try to collect and amplify those stories. The public needs to have an uncomfortable reckoning with the egregious abuses that were inflicted on largely nonviolent, peaceful, decent Americans. And we must resolve that this can never happen again. Step one of that is to recognize what actually did happen. And so we are committed to that effort.
John Strand, thank you so much. Thank you for saying yes to God, and thank you for saying yes to America, because you weren't just standing for yourself in obedience, but your obedience has a ripple effect across our country. And for that, I speak for all Americans. We are so grateful for you. I'm so glad that you said yes to the Lord that day. And so we are J6.com. I actually was on one of your Zoom calls and was watching about a week ago. I think it was a week and a half ago. It was late at night, and I couldn't sleep. And I just loved the organization of it all, and getting the transcripts and finding out, when they called y'all insurrectionists. And really, it's an organized effort. I highly encourage just all Americans to just go to wearej6.com and get involved in learning the truth. And then johnstrand.com, get his book, Patriot Plea. And then also you've got to go to at John Strand USA and watch that 14-minute video. Do you know what happened on J6? Because I guarantee you, you don't. And it's 14 minutes. It's very, very quick to watch, but very, very powerful. So John Strand, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I just want to say thank you so much for your service to God and to our country. God bless you.
Thank you, Miriam. God bless you. It's been an honor, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Yes, sir. And thank you all so much. We're going to take a quick short break, and then we'll be right back.
Excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed, because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but I did not really know very much about MyPillow until 2020, when Mike Lindell was standing up for voting integrity and was pursuing that path. And man, they came after him and tried to destroy him. And so I don't know about you, but when I see folks standing for truth, I want to get behind them and vote with my wallet. And so I just thought they had pillows, maybe some other things. And when I got on the website, I was like, oh my gosh, you can find a little bit of everything here. And I've mentioned this before. He has these really cool cross necklaces that are basically a replica of what he says he's worn for, I think he said, like the last 20 years. And so they're really beautiful. They have one for men, one for women. And I'd just be so honored if you hopped on their website and just look to see, is there anything I'm currently buying somewhere else that I could purchase from mypillow.com. And when you use that and you use the code MISSION, you're not only supporting the freedom fighter, Mike Lindell, but you're also supporting Mission for Freedom. It turns out having a podcast isn't free, surprise. And we are independent. And so we can do this because of you. And so if you were to be so gracious today and hop on there and just see if there's anything that you can use, we would be so honored and grateful, because it is independent and it's sponsored by you. And so we are so grateful for you for doing that. Also, I showed you earlier in the broadcast, lutfstudio.com, our amazing producer, Inaz, is actually an artist. So she's not just a creative genius as it relates to production, but also she's a brilliant artist, and her pieces are just gorgeous. And so if you use the code MISSION there, lutfstudio.com, you'll receive a discount there. So it's a win for you, it's a win for us, and it's a win for our amazing sponsors. We are so, so grateful for them. John Strand, his story, if that doesn't rock you to your core, I'm going to ask you if you're breathing, because that story, it's just so profound to me that this can happen in America. And I'm so thrilled that I believe justice will be served. And like I was telling him, I was on that that X call where the spaces where everybody was on there talking about a plan on this plan for restorative justice. And so I am so thrilled that we as Americans can get behind him and support him. And by grabbing his book, Patriot Plea, I am really excited to read that. I'm sure it will be completely gut-wrenching to learn even more details, but we were deprived of details for so long. And so that's why I'm really interested in getting his book, Patriot Plea, and learning more about it. I wanted to talk to you the end here about narratives, and truth. And I know in our previous, a couple of our shows ago, we talked about truth versus fear, and that we're always going to speak the truth, whether it supports someone with an R, Republican after their name, whether it supports if truth is coming from somebody with a D, Democrat after the name. We're in the mission for truth, mission for freedom, and you can't have freedom without truth. So I did want to talk to you guys about an article that just came out. It says it was published 19 hours ago, and it was Fox that shared it. And it says how Trump might get rid of the penny and what could come next for your pocket change. And so when you go to this article, what is so interesting to me is that I looked at all the articles. There was CNN, Wall Street Journal, all sorts of right and left leaning folks. So we're all saying the same thing. So I find that really cool. But it says President Trump unveiled plans Sunday to halt production of the penny, but getting that initiative underway requires a few additional steps and possibly congressional approval. And he's saying for far too long, quote, for far too long, the United States has minted pennies, which literally cost us more than 2 cents. It's actually a little over 3 cents to make each penny. So this all sounds good, right? Like he's trying to save money. It's actually 3.69 cents, according to a 2024 U.S. Mint report. And so we look at this, but then it's so interesting because nickels, if you scroll down, it says nickels are worth 5 cents, cost approximately 13.8 cents to mint, according to the 2024 U.S. Mint report. So folks are suggesting that, why don't we get rid of, if we're going to get rid of anything, why don't we get rid of the nickel? I just wanted to draw your attention to this. So, Doge is looking to cut back in all these different places. I think the thing about this, I'm curious what you guys think about this, and comment and tell me what you think on this. But for me, and I'm going to have our producer Inez weigh in on this because she has an educated opinion about pretty much everything, including hair, makeup, like all the things. But Inez, if you could hop in, here too and weigh in on this. But here is my concern. I've been listening to Creature from Jekyll Island, and they're talking about how before the Great Reset, the New World Order can be in place, that countries are going to line up with other countries. And so now we're seeing President Trump talk about obtaining Canada. We've got Gulf of America going on. Now, the Gaza Strip, he's saying that we should, take that over. And really, he's saying Egypt can weigh in here and be part of it, and other countries. But the United States is orchestrating all this. So I see that, and I think in the back of my head about, this is what has to happen before the New World Order can commence, right? Is we have to become regions, because it's easier for us to all join as regions than individual countries. Well, just like that concept, I thought about the money. So what do we have to do before central bank digital currency can start? Well, we have to get rid of currency. We have to get rid of our cash. And we already charge everything on credit cards pretty much now anyway. But with seeing this, it makes me think, now our money, it costs money. It costs money to produce this money. And so Inez, I was wondering what your thoughts were when you read this and hear this information. What goes off inside of you? Any alarm bells? And I do not hear you, but maybe I can learn how to read lips. I still can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Of course not, because I was muted.
Oh, well, there you go. You're a little echoey.
I should be fixed now.
You're
That's me.
beautiful.
Thank you. You know, when I'm running things behind the scene, I'm always muted, so I don't interrupt you, except when I do unmute myself to tell you how much time we have. Yeah, I was
Right.
actually giggling over here when you're like, including hair and makeup. Like, I just did my hair
Oh.
once. That looked good.
Well, you have the best videos. I highly encourage folks to follow you on Facebook because and TikTok and all the places because you have the best dance videos, hair and makeup videos, and are just you do what is that called, Inez, when you do the
Get ready with
mouthing?
me. Oh,
What's
lip
that?
sync. Lip
Yeah,
sync.
lip sync. I mean, it's so entertaining. So I know that you have a great opinion about everything, and we don't always agree, which is great too. That's America, right? We can have differing opinions and still adore each other. There's a concept for you today on Tuesday. But what do you think when you read this article, Inos?
It's funny. Let's connect what I think to what you just said. Lip sync. I feel like we're looking at a lip sync. Get ready, Trump lovers. Get ready. I'm about to hurt your feelings. I really think, in this very specific topic and few other topics, but this one since you're talking, I think President Trump is lip syncing to somebody else's idea. I don't believe this is his. I do believe they sold him on the idea, but I don't think it's him. The reason I say that is I'm not going to sit here and I say I believe President Trump is the, reform Christian following God person because his ego is kind of taking him away from that path. But I will say, as someone who knows business, who understands business, and has actively tried to stop the globalism, some of his moves, including the AI system, including this system, it seems to go against what he believes.
Yeah.
As you just said, before we get there, I mean, I know I can hear a lot of people out there right now saying, oh, come on, it's just penny. It starts with a penny. As a very darling person out there that, Lord forgive me as I forgot her name, said, Auschwitz was not built in one day. Guys, globalism isn't going to happen in one day. Digital currency isn't going to happen in one day. It starts with banning of penny to nickel to dime to quarter to dollar to hundred to all of that. That's how it goes, which let me shamelessly plug one of our greatest sponsors right here at Mission for Freedom. This is why having hard assets such as gold and silver comes to major play, because they can't, I don't care who it is, Elon Musk, President Trump, Putin, or Khamenei, nobody can cancel gold and silver or any kind of precious metal for that matter because they existed before we did. By we, I mean America. So this is why some people, as you know, Miriam, myself, I'm a newbie to this topic. Actually, you have been educating me on the concept of precious metal because I was a no person myself. I always thought it's a delusion. If all things go wrong, I can't take a bite of my gold and I'll starve to death. You've been educating me on it off air when we talk. So I strongly believe that, first of all, people need to start educating themselves on this topic of it's just a penny. Also, they need to get active. Get involved, learn. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm her producer. Most of your audience may not be familiar with me, but my audience know that I'm a truth teller no matter what. She can really tell you the difference. Just pick up the phone, give her a call on her lower third right now. There are two information, a phone number and an email address. If you're shy, send her an email. If you're not shy, if you're like me, pick up the phone, give her a call. Just let her explain to you why having silver or gold, or both for that matter, could actually save your future when all of this comes to an end, where the deepest state, that is not a Democrat thing, actually, it's deepest state is the uniparty. When they all come to their end game, you're safe for a while until you come up with a backup plan.
That's right. And I want to rat you out right here on Live America Media here. So Inez and I were talking about gold and silver, and she just says it like it is, whether she's the same on camera, off camera, same person, which is beautiful, right? That's why we love her so much. And so she said to me, I hope you don't mind I'm sharing this, but she said to me, I kind of I'm a real estate person, like, because hard assets, that's the name of the game. And I said, that's great. You should have real estate. I mean, it's expensive. Like, you tell somebody, hey, start saving up to go buy a house, right? If you were to, pay cash for that, that's going to take a minute. But then on the flip side of that, unloading that and liquidating that and getting, if you did need to get cash for it, with gold and silver, hard asset, you can get it quickly and you can dump it quickly. And that's the beauty of gold and silver. But yes, we should be diversified. We should have multiple hard assets. But do you remember me telling you that? Like, we were just talking about how hard it is to get it and how long it takes to like sell a home or to sell land. It takes a minute to do that.
Yes, actually, that was the defining moment for me. I'm like, you know what? She is right. She's not asking you to sell your house and go buy gold.
Right.
She's just telling you to diversify your options. And
Yes.
it's funny, Miriam, talking to you and, doing my own homework through what I can. You said something on one of your recent shows which got my attention, and I did homework. For a lot of more, I would say, average, like myself, income people, the thought of gold is very, like, out there. Like, by the time I save enough to buy a piece of gold.
Oh, yeah.
So I started looking at the silver situation, and you were right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to go out of my way to. I was calculating, and I'm a chart girl. Like, I write it down and all that. If all fails, I should have been an accountant or at least a bookkeeper. And I looked at it. I was like, simply, and I don't spend, but simply, if I would cut down on literally one coffee a day that I make at home, not a Starbucks, but one coffee a day, I could start buying monthly silver.
Yeah.
As simple as
Yeah.
that, I could start piling up silver. And then at some point turn that silver into gold.
And that's what I do. Like, I had a 401k. You can, roll that over. It can become gold and silver backed. Some people don't have a 401k and they say, how can I even start this process? But some will get 1 ounce of silver every Friday. Like, I write up the order every Friday, whether it's $28, $30 every single Friday, it comes to your house or whatever, or every other Friday or once a month, just some type of routine. But the neat thing about silver too, some folks who can afford gold at, $2,800, $3,000, $2,900 an ounce, that's a lot of money. Some people can afford that, but most can't. And the beauty also of the silver is they're like, oh, it's $30 an ounce. I mean, is that going to make a difference if, an apocalypse happens? I think I just butchered that name. Apocalypse, right? Happens. That's not going to do much for me, and I can't eat it. But here's the thing about silver. It is so undervalued right now. And so a lot of the experts, Andy Scheckman from Miles Franklin Precious Metals, I'm an outside broker for them, and he has educated all of the brokers in saying, listen, silver at some point is going to balance out, and it is going to be worth a whole lot more. You think you're just buying 1 ounce of silver, but when it regulates and it balances out, it's going to be worth far more than that. So it's a really great investment from that standpoint as well.
Agreed. And again, one thing doing my study and talking to you, the beauty of it, kind of like real estate, is you may not profit tomorrow, but you don't lose your investment. What you put in stays same value, even if something happens and it doesn't double itself, whatever it does. It's not as risky. Of course, it's not as rewarding either. However, at least the base that you put in is always going to stay strong where it should be. That's
Right,
one thing.
right.
When you told me about that, I was like, well, with real estate, I at least don't lose on the house. You're like, well, with gold, you don't either. I'm like, oh, I
Right?
don't. And here's the
No.
thing, since you outed me on air, and I need to say this and take myself off first so you can close the show because we have literally less than 45 seconds.
Okay.
I come from a country where gold and dollar, it's a roller coaster. So it doesn't have a base value. So that was my mindset when you explained to me that that's not the same in America. You don't see silver or gold going downward. You might see the value of dollar dropping, but not that. So anyways, bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, Miriam Shaw, you might see her about 2 hours a week on camera, but that's not all she puts in. She has dedicated many years of her life into homeschooling, exposing the truth, raising a beautiful, handsome, awesome son of his that I have had the honor to meet and talk to you. So I'm pleading to you, get behind her, because she cannot do this every week, twice a week on her own, and you can't expect her to do it. You know why? Because it takes more than one person to win the battle, and it definitely takes an army to deliver the mission. So she is on a mission here. I am honored to be part of her army, and I'm inviting all of you to join her army right here on Mission for Freedom. Simple ways are: subscribe to her channels, follow her, spread her message by sharing, and then pick up that phone, give her a call, and let's see if she can in return help you with your investment. Thank you, Miriam. I'm going to go take me off air. You can wrap up the show, and I hope folks start blowing up your phone.
Yes, call me. And because I'm an outside broker, I can set the price within a reasonable amount. I can adjust it a little bit. So Andy Scheckman doesn't like to be beat by anybody, so we do our best. He has some of the best pricing in the nation. It's been around for 34 years without one customer complaint. That's why I trust Miles Franklin Precious Metals. So give me a call. I'd be so honored. And Ines, thank you so much for your kind words. And just give us a follow too. We are on X, X American News. We are also broadcasting on there. We'd love for you to follow them as well. And then of course on Rumble, that's our main platform we're trying to grow. So follow Mission for Freedom on Rumble as well. So thank you. I look forward to building an army with you and to connect with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and God bless.